Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the most important panel of this year's Freedom Games, in my opinion. That is the strategy of pro-democratic parties for the coming elections. One strategy, many strategies. I'd like to introduce the guests. MP Anita Sowińska, New Left. Michał Kobosko, Vice President of the party Poland 2050. Szłapka, President of Nowoczesna, Koalicja Obywatelska, MP. I'd like to start with a quotation. The coming elections are very important. We must win them. But our goal is not to crush the opponents. Our goal is to build a society around our idea. That's what Jarosław Kaczyński said in Puławy. So are the elections going to be a clash of ideas? So what's going to dominate the next electoral year? Down-to-earth ideas or a clash of ideas? Mr. Szłapka, thank you very much for invitation. It's very interesting to listen to President Kaczyński. The more, the better for the opposition. There's no unequivocal answer whether it's a clash of ideas or down-to-earth problems. For sure, what is at stake is fundamental issues. That is, whether we're going to have a liberal democracy in Poland over the coming years, just the way we understand it in Western civilization. So, in this respect, it is a clash of serious ideas. But, in my opinion, and there are also polls showing that we don't need to build society in Poland. We have society, civic society. It functions. You can see that in research, in electoral results. I think that the Democratic fraction is much larger, 66%, the people who vote for Democratic parties. The problem is that the electoral system is constructed in Poland in the way that we democratic members of society have different ideas, different views, and they vote for different parties. And Law and Justice, for instance, if it's a populist party, they can attract more voters. So whether we choose a liberal democracy or some, let's say, camouflaged authoritarianism. Now, Putin says this situation about a sovereign democracy. Orban talks about a liberal democracy, but the idea is the same. It's going away from liberal democracy, democratic system, it's rule of law, free media, so all of the constituents of democracy now. This does not change the fact that in addition to the large ideas, we're going to talk about down-to-earth issues, and the elections are going to be about life, and primarily about what we are affected by these days. So expensive electricity, the coming winter that's going to pass before the elections, but food getting more and more expensive, but it's going to be exactly the same way as it's been since 2015. So Law and Justice Party and Jarosław Kaczyński, they try to execute a maneuver that's been known for a long, long time, for sure. He will want to generate some fear. In 2015, it was migrants, then LGBT, Germany, Donald Tusk, and so he'll try and generate fear and give a simple answer. So this is a difference between liberal democracy and populism in terms of down-to-earth issues. The elections will be primarily about the very bad condition of the Polish economy. Now, this attempt to escape into the sphere of big ideas, it's maybe a cover for down-to-earth issues. Now, I'd like to move on to President Kobosko. What's going to be the dominant theme in the electoral year? Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be in this excellent number of panelists. I'd like to congratulate on the organizers of Freedom Games. And I'm very happy that no one was detained on the day of opening. These days, you never know anything. For example, someone can travel across a country, and okay, some officer asks about you. Okay, we're used to living in this country. Now, this is what has happened recently, and whatever I would say, the issue is extremely serious because it concerns the foundations of the state in which we live. As if you detain public personalities and then the court releases them because there are no grounds for a 3-month custody, this is a country in which you would never like to live, a country in which nothing is certain. Anyone can be accused of anything, very often fabricated, in which we can be kept in custody. One thing is talking about rule of law. Now, it's quite obvious that for a common man, it sounds very high-handed. It's a constitutional tribunal and so on and so forth. Most people do not think these issues affect them directly. It's another thing when we show you that this affects court cases. For example, you have a litigation against your neighbor, and if you have a party judge, and if your opponent is close to the ruling party, you won't be able to do anything. So this election will also be about this, about our laws that we've been deprived of day after day for the past several years, and to bring back a law to our country, to make sure the country functions as it should. Now, when I think about restoring justice, it's like going forward. It's not that we should go back to the situation as of 2015. No, we would not be happy if we went back to 2015, and also keeping on to this example, in 2015, the courts of law did not work well in 2015. We must be honest about it, and this part of Polish reality has not worked well for the past 30 years, and most of members of society are really unnerved when they hear they need to go to the court for for any reason, because the long time of waiting, so on and so forth, the complicated language. So we must not say we want to go back to 2015. Now, Law and Justice Party wanted to obviously destroy the system, but we must make sure for the people who need to go to the court, so that they could have their cases heard in a short time and based on justice rather than politics. Obviously, the election will be largely about economics. This is what affects anyone. This is money evaporating in all dimensions. The value of zloty is going down under the tenure of Mr. Glapiński. The value of our currency is further going down, because if we have this kind of the Ministry of Finance, National Bank of Poland, and Monetary Council, we are in a very bad situation. We have a war next door. When Lviv is being bombarded, it's very, very close. It's only about 200 kilometers to the Belarusian border. If the Belarus gets involved, then the war will get even closer. So the war is coming closer, and this raises a question of our place in the European Union and NATO, also energy issues, environmental issues, green issues that are so important for my party. Now, Jarosław Kaczyński gave us a choice in his presentations. He's making rounds around the country, so Jarosław Kaczyński talks about different narratives, and then we need to comment on what he says. It's a waste of time. It's a stupid thing, some visions. He remembers something from 30 years ago. He creates a worldview, an image of the world that is not existent around us, but also President Kaczyński, the president of the Law and Justice Party, he gives us a choice. Should we burn lignite in our houses or just freeze to death? Or we could die of heart attack or cold. So these are the main issues, but we are talking 1 year ahead of the election. So this year, it's a very long time. A lot can happen.
Madam MP, a similar question. What will be the subjects and what subjects will be proposed by the opposition? I think that there will be three main themes. The main will be the European Union, and then the social social aspects like high prices, lack of energy, and different political affairs and scandals. Well, I'll start with the first one. I've been observing politics for some years, and in the previous elections, Law and Justice didn't dare attacking the European Union because they knew that people were very much in favor of Poland's presence in the EU. But over recent years, Law and Justice has done a lot to present the European Union as something oppressive, of not liking us, and some using disinformation, and some people, some voters believe in that. So now Law and Justice feels they can do more, so they get into conflict not only with our neighbor Germany, but also undermine EU politics, such as policies such as Green Deal. So to me, this will be the main contentious issue, and we need to show where we stand. We, as the left, we are on the side of the European Union and Clean Poland. Well, I'd like to continue this subject. So, elections to authorities to the self-government have been brought closer to the European elections. Do you think that taking elections to the self-government further from the elections to the parliament will be planned for Polexit? I think that that was a calculated political movement. Law and Justice didn't want to link parliamentary elections with elections to the self-government because they were afraid that they would lose a lot. Because mainly in cities and towns, Law and Justice lose. This is confirmed, for example, this was confirmed by the elections in Ruda Śląska, where they lost in the first round. So I think that was the reason why they made this move. I wouldn't look for other reasons. But coming back to the elections, high prices, and the lack of ability on the side of the ruling party to do something about it. Insufficient supplies of fuel that should be highlighted and stressed. And the third theme, which hasn't resonated here enough, this will be different scandals and affairs. I know that there are many of them, and none has shaken the political stage as yet. But please note that some Law and Justice voters have got demotivated. The support for them was 40%. Now it's 34%. We know that the DONT system acts against small parties, but also it operates differently depending on how high support is gained by the leading party. There are many affairs and scandals, and recently I got engaged very much in something that is this is just the elephant in the room, not observed by anyone. That is the fact that state-owned energy companies they are just collecting money from our pockets for energy, for supplies of energy. They are making record-breaking profits, and our main PGE. Main energy supplier, they have higher and higher profits, which then they share with the ruling party. These were these famous posters with a light bulb from which we could learn that the high energy prices were due to the policy of the EU. Kaczynski mentioned also about the force or task force or corpus to protect elections and organizing boxes for voters close to the church, where in smaller village or towns, people when leaving the church they could vote. So how does this impact the position of the opposition party? I would start with Chairman Kobosko, because you talked about it quite a lot. But unfortunately, how could we change this in the forthcoming election campaign? We will not change the rules, of course, but how? Of course not. But how do you want to reach out with your message closer and better to the voters? Well, we don't know what the election rules will be, because Law and Justice changes their opinion overnight. So one day they say there will be changes, on the next day there will not be changes. So that was our postulate from the very beginning, that some changes cannot take place overnight. If we want to change the election rules, these new rules should be binding as of the next election. So Law and Justice is doing as much as they can to mitigate their failure, because they are aware of their forthcoming failure. They are speaking to us individually. They know that everything collapses and that they don't stand good chances of winning. So no matter what, how much votes they get, they will most probably stop being the ruling party. Of course, voting lists are important, candidates are important. So that's all that we are working currently on. The 4 blocks in the opposition, we want to maximize our chances. I think that the Law and Justice, that they have become aware of the fact that the change of the election rules could be counterproductive and that they could result in even bigger defeat. As the opposition bloc, political parties and NGOs, we have proposed the citizen system of monitoring the election. So we are preparing a big army of people who will be looking at how these voices are calculated. So, of course, now Kaczynski says that this is the opposition that aims at falsifying the elections. Probably for the hardcore of law and peace enthusiasts, this is some kind of a message that they still believe in. But to most people, and definitely not to the opposition, this is something that we could treat seriously, because this is just to threaten people with something that will never happen, that's never going to materialize. And let me stop at this. Well, we'll be doing lots of things. Well, honestly speaking, we meet a year before the elections. We are not going to tell you what our election strategy will be. And sorry to disappoint you, because we are working on it, and we are working on it individually. And I hope that we will also be working on it together when it comes to certain ideas, certain working groups. Well, for some months already, we've been proposing a substantive discussion on what, after winning the elections, what we should do first. Well, we are not in the situation of Germany, when some parties or a concrete small group of parties win the elections, and then they sit together at the table and negotiate. This time they did it within quite a short period of time, but we don't have this luxury, we don't have this time. That's why Szymon Hołownia said something which elicited a campaign of haters. Because we expect the challenges to be similar to those in 1989 or 1990. So this new government will not have time to prioritize what is more important, which should be done first. So this is what we should do within the months to come. We don't have time. We are getting ready to the elections individually, but I'm sure that after the elections, the responsibility will be shared across all the political parties of the opposition. But this is not about allocating lucrative positions, but about deciding what should be done first in the first 100 days. So, according to you, how does the opposition can impose some narrative on law and justice, and how to change the rules of the game? Your voters live mainly in big cities. Well, not necessarily, but let's leave that aside. I think that to change the election rules and election ordinance, that will not happen, because I think that if Kaczynski decided that this would be beneficial, he would have done it already. We will, if he changes the rules of election, we'll adjust to it, and then I'm sure he will lose 100%. But when it comes to the number of voting points or centers, and this is really, if I have understood it correctly, I understand that at each church or in each church there will be a voting center or a place where people can vote, because he wants his electorate to vote. I'd like to say that this is very dangerous for the church. 40% of Polish population are people who go to church twice a month, but only 55% of them vote for law and justice. The rest vote for the left, for Hołownia, for civic platform, and so on. And if the church gets engaged so much actively in the elections, this will be the end, the beginning of the end for the church. So I hope that if anybody from the church is hearing what I'm saying now, that's my view. Of course, we need to impose our narrative. So if Kaczynski is saying stupid things about brown coal, or he presents his opinion, we need to say what we think about it, because that's what media expect of us. But we also try to impose our subjects, women rights, rights of LGBT plus people, our ideas for energy, national parks, and so on and so forth. So it's happening, and it bears fruit, because we can see it in the polls and in the support that we have for our for what we propose. For example, for the abortion available until the 12th week of pregnancy, or support for partnership for partner for civic partnerships, because we are also here to impose and to present our messages about what we think is important.
Now, in what you said, we heard about this anti-German attitude of law and justice. Now, recently, we heard about reparations. I was quite surprised that opposition parties supported that act of law in terms of requiring reparations from Germany. What was the idea behind it, maybe for the law and justice to lose initiative? Now, there are several issues here. Let me start with voting districts, because that is a question about fairness and any trust in the authorities. I'm not Jarosław Kaczyński. I do not have any evidence that in Poland elections recently have been free but not fair. So in terms of the process of the election day, obviously everything is according to the procedure of the State Electoral Commission. But if we talk about the electoral process as a whole, as a political campaign, over the past several years, we have a situation where we have not had an even playing field. We have public television, which is an instrument of propaganda. We have ministries. We have provincial governors. We have also state-owned companies that are pumped into the campaign. In 2019, after the Europe Parliament elections, I notified the prosecutors, because even the ministerial vehicles had electoral slogans supporting law and justice without the name of the party. So basically, the program of the party was on vehicles without the logo of the party. So everyone knew what it meant. So even today, we need to realize that elections in Poland have not been fair from the point of view of what Law and Justice has been doing. And whatever Jarosław Kaczyński says needs to be taken seriously, dead serious. Now, he said that we should create an election protection corps. We've had that in history, this PPN paramilitary organization protected the referendum in 45. Now, talking about additional districts near churches, we all know what this is about. Now, if the opposition entered the elections like this, obviously he would change the electoral law and create, let's say, 100 electoral countries. And then he knows that we would create one electoral list, and then he would stand no chance. So there is no thinking about the good of the country. It's only thinking about preserving power, remaining in power. So we must keep an eye on it. We must have people on each electoral district. It's not so easy to steal the elections. Of course, the campaign is not fair, but the electoral process can be. So now let's move on to the next point. We live in a reality that is not always dependent on us. Now, please take note that at the beginning of 2020, Law and Justice stumbled. Opposition parties were able to impose a narration. For example, opposition parties came up with the idea to transfer 2 billion zloty for the health service rather than the public TV. Now, the Law and Justice Party had major problems then. Now, the reality came to the help of Law and Justice, and now the government had all the cards at hand. So the minister, the prime minister, were on TV every day. There's no world outside of the government. The opposition disappeared. 2 years later, January, beginning of February 2022, Law and Justice also started to have problems, the scandals and so on. Now, what happened? A war broke out. It's not a time or place for an ordinary political fight. Everyone should work together now. Now, the new issues like high prices, the European Union, mentally, they're outside of Europe. Now, you asked about reparations. Now, generally speaking, in everyday life, in Law and Justice, no one thinks in terms of functioning of the country, presence of Poland in Europe, our security. Now, taking into account Russian aggression, we must be integrated with the West. So they only have a kind of current party thinking. Now, Law and Justice sets traps for opposition and digs holes into which we should fall. Now we need to separate between things that are very harmful action from the point of view of the state. It's an attempt to go around the trap will be very, very high cost. And what is the trap? But without major consequences. The issue of reparations, now this is something prepared only for, let's say, internal politics. Law and Justice has not prepared any serious consequences. Even the note, a diplomatic note sent to Germany, was kind of fictitious. No. We added some points on the Soviet Union into that declaration. If we went against it, then Law and Justice would repeat several times a day that we went against national interest. I'd like to compare this to a situation in the last term. They exactly used the same method. What they wanted is to apply their ideas locally. Now, what I mean is the law on the Institute of National Memory. Of course, I was one of the few MPs who voted against it. It destroyed our relations with the United States, Israel. But in all parties, there are people who voted for, and that is something that we must avoid. Situations in which law and justice can destroy our Polish relations just in their own interest. Now, in the case of reparations, we had to defuse the bomb. They don't have it anymore, and there won't be any consequences. But can you use these strategies in the long term? Now, I can't imagine a situation where the opposition will vote with Law and Justice just to deprive them of arguments. Now, let's take this question to you. You voted against your club, your party. Now, I abstained for two reasons. For a global reason, as we have a difficult situation, Russian aggression in Ukraine, energy crisis, and at a time when we need unity in the European Union, because that's the only way of prevailing against Russia. We want to create a conflict within the European Union. I think it's extremely irresponsible, and the next thing is an ethical issue. I cannot put a price on human life, especially after so many years. And obviously, some of the formulation notes in the report were unacceptable. For example, Poland wanted to get reparations for what happened in Jedwabne, but that's a detail. But politically speaking, opposition behaved wisely because opposition acted pragmatically. Right now, voting for this act of law, the opposition says, okay, you have a mandate. Now, okay, the ball is in your court. Now it's your turn to get the reparations. So the Law and Justice tried to set up a trap for the opposition. Now the opposition set up a trap for Law and Justice. So politically speaking, that was a good movement because that reparation conflict would favor Law and Justice, and in this way we kind of rendered Law and Justice toothless. I wonder whether this was right from this point of view. Yes, I think it was correct. It's, our MPs abstained. And we had a longer discussion before a vote, and some people wanted to vote against because we knew what it was all about, that this was not a step towards getting any kind of money from Germany. It was an extremely cynical act for the internal goals of the party. Now, we decided we must not let the Law and Justice blackmail us because they will act in exactly the same way. We are already having an election campaign. This is the mode of working. They're going to set up traps, bills, and acts of law, and say, okay, either you vote with us or you're anti-Polish, you're traitors, so on and so forth. So it was our conscious decision to abstain. To be clear, we don't talk about reparations, but the issue of compensation for the losses and damages caused by the Third Reich is not closed. Now we're discussing with our colleagues from German parties. We know the position of the German government after the Second World War. Poland was not a sovereign country, and this subject must not be considered closed, and this subject will be continued. And in our opinion, once the ruling party changes, we will not consider the subject non-existent. But right now, what Law and Justice does, they're not going to get even €1 of compensation from Germany. I think this subject is going to come back. But today we know the way Law and Justice works. It's trying to appropriate certain issues, trying to privatize our way of thinking. We must not concede to that. It's not the property of Law and Justice, as it is privatizing and stealing the country. Law and Justice is trying to steal our patriotism, but you cannot do that, yes. So even once you had this inspection in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Kaczynski said that opposition is against the Polish country. Now, if I want to be malicious, I would ask you how your MPs voted in the case of the Institute of Public Remembrance. I absolutely agree with you that Kaczynski is not intent on the €1 from the reparations. It's about blackmail. No, it's about the 1% or maybe 2 or 5% in the polls. Now, when we talk about opposition strategies, it's difficult to talk about strategies, but one thing is pretty obvious to the extent that you can reveal it. So the polls show there is no flow in the voters between Law and Justice and the opposition. The issue is who can mobilize voters and whose voters will be demobilized. So this trap was set for us to fall in it and vote against the law or abstain, so that Law and Justice could mobilize their voters for the whole year. Okay, they're anti-Polish, pro-German, and when they come, but they do that anyway, whatever you say. But now they need to look for some other arguments. They need to show to Donald Tusk 80 times per day and talk about completely stupid things. They would have a ready argument. And I agree with Mrs. Sowińska that we were right. We added the Soviet Union because they didn't want it for some reason. And I said, okay, let's do it. No problem. And there won't be that issue until elections. So this is a way to diffuse their traps. And you must be very careful. But the Institute of Public Remembrance, as we cannot rebuild our relationship with Israel. And we have a good relationship with the United States only because of the war.
And the last question, because I'm sure that there will be also questions from the audience. This is quite an obvious question concerning the blocks. That is, in how many blocks will you go for elections, taking account of personal differences between the leaders? Okay. Well, first of all, we need to ask ourselves a question. What's our objective? Our objective is to win, that is to and to get the biggest number of mandates. A very interesting poll by Poster showed that united opposition will get over 50%, but confederation will benefit from it, 12.5%. But the second conclusion from this poll, opinion poll, was that if there were many more blocks on the side of the opposition, our end result would be better. So we need to take pragmatic decisions. We have made it clear we can cooperate, we can rule the country together. We do it at the level of parliamentary committees, work groups, so I can see this cooperation. We can cooperate. So how many blocks? Well, there are two aspects to it. We know the don't rule, but in the don't system, we don't want small political parties to get below the threshold. That's the most important. Well, in my opinion, the major benefit would be if Polish Peasants' Party and Poland 2050 would go together, because there is a risk of the Peasants' Party to be under the threshold. But we are also taking some steps, because we decided strategically to cooperate with the party Razem, by the name of Razem, together. Well, to you, it may seem they are also on the left, but they are a different political party, and we have to take care of the unity on the left end of the spectrum. But another thing is how many votes will Law and Justice get. Some years ago, they had 40%, 2 years ago, but now they have 34%. This is the support that they have. This also translates into the number of their mandates and places, seats, the number of seats in the parliament. So we also need to demobilize the Law and Justice voters. And I think that Kaczynski is very much aware of it. That's why he speaks of these electoral districts close to the church, close to their voters, mobilized by the priests. And we need to do everything. We need to show that they are unable to rule the country, that they can't fight high prices, that they fuel the inflation, that they can't provide Poles with coal. So we need to reach out with such pieces of information to the voters of Law and Justice, even if they don't vote for us. But there is a hope and the chance that some of these people will just not vote at all. Well, Chairman, will Polska 2050, Poland 2050 go together with the Peasants' Party? Well, thank you very much, Madam, for helping us in very difficult political activity. I just wanted to say that we hope that the left will go together with the civic platform. There are so many points where it seems quite obvious. Well, I'm not going to advise anyone who they should go with for the elections, and I'm not going to say who we are going to go with to these elections. But let's focus on what's common to all of us. Well, first of all, that we are still before elections, but after the elections, we'll be able to make an agreement on the government. It will not be easy, of course, because our voters differ very much. So those parties which present their postulates for the elections, they are very diverse. But we want to create a stable government. This is one of the challenge. Currently, the country is indebted. They will just leave us with that, and they will say, well, do whatever you can with it, and we'll tell you then that when we were the ruling party, we were paying 500 zloty for each child, and we were paying 13 and 14 pension to pensioners, but we need to think of sustainable ideas for a sustainable and stable government. Well, when it comes to the electoral blocks, well, we have time until the end of the year. We think this is quite premature to discuss it right now. We think that we need to have a kind of program discussion, which is not taking place yet among the leaders of democratic parties, but we believe that that such an exchange of views is very much necessary, and blocks should be created to ensure quite a clear win of the opposition. Well, we have the pact in the Senate, and there are no problems with that. We know that we have to act together there, and I believe that in the Senate we'll be able to negotiate our going together to increase our majority to 60 plus senator seats, so that we could act more in a more stable way than before the elections. Well, how many lists? Well, if there are 4 lists, this will not be a good solution. There should be fewer, and we've been very much in favor of 2 lists for quite a long time. So Civic Coalition and the left. No, we are not going to suggest anything like that. I think we are not ready yet. Each political party is, and we are the youngest one. We are working. We are preparing our candidates, our lists, our campaign, and it's a lot of work. And what's the end result is we will see soon. Well, what about the civic coalition? Well, when I hear that we will make agreements after elections, I'm afraid that we may. First of all, we need to win these elections, because otherwise we will agree about how we act as an opposition. We have to think in terms of winning these elections. So we need to win the elections instead of saying, oh, well, okay, we'll go for elections, and then we will think how we distribute the departments in the future government. Well, I think hard enemy year would be the best system. I think, first of all, we should change the DOM system. We should do away with it. We are very much differentiated. There are liberals, there are conservatives. Conservatives, this is a wide array of views, and we, for quite some time, people are voting for lesser evil, which is a dramatic choice, and we are also losing quite many people because but our potential voters, because they don't want to vote, because they say, well, anyway, I'm choosing between something that is bad and from my point of view, and something that is worse. So people should be able to vote for what they feel they should vote for. And today, it's not. Today, we are not playing a normal game. There are no rules for the game. We have to maximize our win. So we know how DONT system works. Because it gives more seats, or everybody, absolutely everybody, should be within one big democratic bloc, doing absolutely what we can to mobilize our voters. So with full mobilization, I believe that such a list could get over 55, 56%. And now we should to translate it into the seats in the parliament. In Warsaw, for example, such a list of the opposition could win 14, 15 seats in the parliament. That means that we could have the overwhelming majority. I was speaking about one list already in March 2018. The left was not existing under this logo yet, and today this is a serious political proposal. I think first we should do what we can to win, and we cannot lose faith, and we cannot be afraid of dreaming that we can win with overwhelming majority. We also should think about constitutional changes. It's not that distant. In 2011, democratic parties had 304 seats in the parliament. Civic Platform, Democratic Left, and Palikot Party. And Law and Justice was very lucky in 2015 because the left was left outside of the parliament, Confederation also, so they got the majority. But if we do try, we can also be lucky to have quite a good end result. We should do it before elections, not after the elections. First question, we have still 3 minutes. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you about this last thing, that is how many lists, and do you as opposition leaders, are you aware of the fact that you can win the elections, have the majority in the parliament, but don't rule the country? How many votes do you need to outvote the president, or to restore what happened within these 8 years? So are you thinking of getting qualified majority, perhaps also sufficient to change the constitution? So I understand this is a rhetorical question because this is about the foundations of our thinking. What this majority will be like, how no matter how many lists we have for these elections, President Duda will be our president for 2 years, and the Constitutional Tribunal will be operating under the supervision of Julia Przyłębska, and they will be trying to make our lives hard. So it would be ideal, of course, if we could have the majority that would allow us to outvote the president veto. I agree. We need to be ambitious. We need to pose far-reaching goals, but it cannot be oversimplistic. It doesn't mean that if we agree on one big happy list of the opposition, that we will get this premium. Well, Adam, you said you think that it would be. Well, you can calculate it. Well, that's why we've been calculating it for months, and we are carrying out a service, and we don't learn from it that one list would be better than 2 lists. And also confederation. The result of confederation is quite worrying, because they are openly pro-Russian, and they represent pro-Russian interests. They may be given a chance. Well, we not only need to win, but we also need to win in the highest proportion possible. We cannot miss a single voter. Some voters say, I will never vote for this or other party. This is the so-called negative electorate. They may not want to vote for the left or for Hołownia or for the coalition. We may not miss them. We may not lose them. It may change, but that shows that one list is not a remedy for it. And it was also clear in Hungary. Of course, it's not a panacea for everything, but there are people here who can count, and the difference between 55% and 57% per one list translates into the difference of 25 seats in the parliament. We need to be aware of that. Of course, we are aware of it, but we need to structure it in such a way to be able to outvote the president veto. And we should also assume that it's possible to get 304 seats. Remember these 304 seats in 2011. But when it comes to the government, of course, we have a lot of possibilities. We can also undermine and reverse many decisions from the times of the Law and Justice because they were simply illegal. We cannot prolong our discussion, although we'd like to discuss it longer. So a round of applause for our panelists, and please address the remaining questions directly.
It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise
Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the U.S. We have about 159 partners in the United States right now, and the bulk of our partners are outside, nearly 500 in total.
Atlas Network, it connects people from all over the world defending the idea of human dignity, defending human rights and personal liberties.
Atlas Network is focusing on, I think, the most important and moral cause in the entire world.
We partner with local innovators, local leaders who understand conditions on the ground in communities facing real challenges. We look at the people from the worldwide freedom movement that are passionate, are ready to make a difference, understand local conditions, and we invest in them.
At Atlas Network, we unleash individual ingenuity to enrich humanity.
The United States does not have a lock on the idea of freedom and liberty. Those ideas are beyond borders.
One of the main goals of Atlas Network is to eradicate poverty around the world, and we do that by investing millions of dollars in our partners' work every year.
Historically, wealthy nations around the world have tried to help low-income countries develop. The way we've been doing it traditionally has not really been working. So there's a movement to do development differently, and that means we need to step back as outsiders and rethink the role that we're playing in helping people in low-income countries achieve their dreams.
We want to make the world a better place. We want to make the world a freer world.
All of us want to leave a legacy and be part of something big to make a better world. This is exactly the work of Atlas Network.
With our growing number of hundreds of successful partners, we're stronger than ever.
Changing the world
Changing the world
Changing the world
starts together
with us.